Our armed forces continue to hunt down fleeing terrorists, inflicting on them huge losses in several areas in Aleppo. Russia and Iran denounced the terrorist operations against journalists in Syria. Terrorist Ahmad Ghreibo admits issuing fatwas that allow killing civilians. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our news for today. The authorities continue to chase fleeing armed terrorist groups in Aleppo.
Law enforcement troops destroyed 7 cars equipped with machine guns coming from El Bab province and killed all the terrorists inside them. The authorities also captured scores of terrorists while chasing armed terrorist groups near Souq al-Hal market in Aleppo and Al-Qura al-Ardiya, Al-Iza'a, Saif al-Dawla access. They dismantled explosive devices planted by armed terrorist groups in 3 stolen government cars. The authorities also dismantled an explosive charges planted by terrorists in a residential building in Saif al-Dawla. They seized a large quantity of weapons that included RPG shells, automatic and Russian rifles, guns, ammunition, and some material for manufacturing explosive devices, in addition to stolen cars' plates.
Russian diplomatic sources emphasized that what has been circulated by TV satellites and different news agencies concerning a statement by Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov during an interview with the Saudi Al Watan website is untrue and groundless. Meanwhile, Russia strongly condemned today the terrorist attacks against journalists in Syria, calling on international organizations and states that influence the opposition to put an end to such operations. Russia Today website has quoted Deputy Director of the Information and Press Department at the Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, as firmly condemning, in a statement published on the ministry's website, the terrorist attacks on the journalists who believe in citizens' basic democratic rights to free access to objective information and to the freedom of speech and opinion. The statement stressed that international and regional organizations, in addition to the states that influence the armed opposition, should not remain silent towards such acts. Zakharova said it is not acceptable for news media representatives to be biased or to observe double standards in their approach to such issues. She added that Moscow has been receiving with extreme concern information from Damascus on the increasing attacks against Syrian and foreign news media launched by the illegal armed groups, including the kidnapping of Al Ikhbariya channel crew on the 10th of August in At-Tal and the assassination of the Director of International News Department at Sana News Agency in Damascus suburbs on the 11th of August. She recalled that head of the International Monitors Mission in Syria, Babakar Gai, has condemned such terrorist operations. Iran's foreign ministry also condemned the terrorist crimes and acts of killing and kidnapping carried out by the armed terrorist groups against innocent citizens and journalists in Syria. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Ramin Mahman-Brest condemned such terrorist acts carried out by the armed terrorist groups, especially those which target the journalists. He expressed deepest sympathy for the martyrdom of journalist Ali Abbas, head of local news department in Sana. In a weekly press conference today, Mahman-Brest said that Iran exerts persisting efforts with influential countries to resolve the crisis in Syria through peaceful means, affirming that Iran is devoting efforts to bring security and stability into Syria and to pave the way for a dialogue between the government and the opposition. Mahman-Brest expressed regret over the role played by the US and its allies to destabilize the region. In denunciation of the systematic terrorism which targets national media, the Syrian Journalists Union and workers in the private and public media institutions organized today a sit-in in tribute for martyr journalist Ali Abbas and in solidarity with the kidnapped journalists. The sit-in was staged outside the building of the Syrian Arab news agency SANA. The participants affirmed that Syrian news media men would not be intimidated by acts of terrorism, which will not prevent them from practicing their work and shouldering their responsibilities and fulfilling their national duty and conveying the truth to the public opinion inside and outside Syria. They pointed out that national media has been targeted since the beginning of the war on Syria, but in a more serious way recently. The Lebanese Hezbollah party denied the allegations of terrorists on arresting one of its members in Damascus. In a statement issued today, the party stressed that the news reports circulated by some media on arresting one of the party's members by the so-called Free Army are completely groundless, asserting that Hassan Salim al-Maqdad is not one of the party's members. Head of the Lebanese Change and Reform Bloc, General Michel Aoun, has warned against any contacts by certain Lebanese sides with the armed terrorist groups in Syria. Aoun criticized the Gulf oil countries and their policies in promoting takfiri thoughts which have nothing to do with Islam. He warned against sowing the seeds of regional or international war, the spark of which could be ignited in the idea of undermining Syria. An Egyptian security source announced that an armed terrorist group attacked a checkpoint for Egyptian security forces in Al-Arish, north of Sinai, causing no casualties. The source added that police troops confronted the assailants, who managed to flee. The incident came at a time when Egypt started a military operation following the killing of 16 Egyptian border guards. Finally, terrorist Ahmad Ali Ghreibo, one of the armed terrorist group's muftis in Al-Mleha, Damascus countryside, admitted that he has issued several fatwas to armed groups that permit killing, upon which terrorists have depended to perpetrate a number of crimes against civilians. Terrorist Ghreibo pointed out that most of the terrorists were drug addicts, and one of them has raped a married woman. He added that a fatwa has been issued on a website known as the Fatwa number 107, permitting to kill anyone who deals with the state. Terrorist Ghreibo went on to say that Al-Qaeda and Jabhat al-Nusra in Syria are takfiris who believe in sectarianism and regard bloodshed as lawful, adding that they have no problem to kill civilians. With this, we conclude our news bulletin for today. For more information about Syria and the region, you can visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy. Up next, the latest business and market news with Vani after the break.
Good afternoon. The General Manager of the Real Estate Bank, Dr. Abed Fadliya, confirmed that this year's deposits are better than last year's and that withdrawals are stable and less than they were in 2011. He pointed out that the Legislative Decree number 51 for 2012 on rescheduling the loans and facilitations for persons who fail to pay their debts to the general banks and Decree number 52 on extending the validity of Decree number 3 for 2012, which stipulates rescheduling the loans granted to the tourist projects which fell behind the payment schedule for 3 months. He said that those two legislative decrees are an opportunity for repayment. Minister of Agriculture asserted that it is implementing its national project for using modern irrigation methods. The director of the project pointed out that 976 entities have been financed via the Agricultural Bank during this year and that the loans for this project have reached 500 million Syrian pounds. Those financed irrigation networks cover 46,000 acres. He further highlighted the importance of this project since it has financed 3.7 billion Syrian pounds as loans and that the lands in which modern irrigation methods have been utilized by this project have reached 313,000 hectares. The General Establishment for Engineering Industries is preparing its investment plan for 2013. After discussing with the Ministry of Finance, it has decided to reduce the establishment's appropriate from 900 million Syrian pounds to less than 500 million Syrian pounds. The establishment pointed out that 141 million pounds have been reduced from the projects of replacing old cables in Damascus, especially for machines and equipment. Moreover, 50 million pounds are dedicated for new projects such as telephone cables replacement in cooperation with the Ministry of Communication, while 80 million pounds have been dedicated to liquid battery plant in Aleppo, aiming at production development. Oil prices edged up to trade close to $114 a barrel. After weak European economic data proved to be slightly less gloomy than anticipated and ahead of a U.S. report expected to show a drop in oil stockpiles. European stocks rose in early tradings, reversing the previous session's dip, ahead of Eurozone's macroeconomic data that could fuel expectation of further stimulus measures from the region's policymakers. Japan's Nikkei share average inched up as investors picked up stocks that were oversold during a disappointing earnings season, with hopes for fresh global stimulus continuing to underpin quiet markets. Gold firmed as the dollar retreated but held within this month's narrow range, as investors awaited news on central bank action to stimulate growth, which could boost liquidity, keep interest rates low, and fuel longer-term inflation fears. The euro rose for a second successive day by better-than-expected French and German growth data, but gains could be tempered by concerns that the broader Eurozone is in a deep slowdown. And with this, we conclude our news. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.